Hi everybody, this is Cynthia. So this is part of my somewhat surprising series on what is Kundalini. And it's a little bit of a follow-up video to the last one that I did, mainly because I have actually cultivated a bit of a community with people who've been having these Kundalini or energetic body experiences. And I think that having more of a dialogue around it is becoming normalized to some degree, and it feels necessary. And especially this topic that I want to bring up today, which is that Kundalini is sometimes very challenging. So for those of you that have had a significant subtle body or energetic body experience, especially those experiences that have driven you toward a non-duality themed kind of exploration or any kind of deep self-inquiry that has come out of those energetic experiences. Well, how many of you thought at some point or another, well, Kundalini is obviously leading toward some state of bliss, or let's just say, like perfect equanimity forever is some available option on the horizon. And this is problematic because actually what I have found with Kundalini 13 years in is that actually the energy can very often be quite traumatizing and certainly challenging. So that's what I wanted to speak to today, is this kind of culture of rainbows and butterflies around the Kundalini experience. I can't tell you how many teachers that I have spoken to in the yoga world, and I am a yoga teacher in California. And so I see this a lot of teachers that are actually trying to get people into a Kundalini awakening. And I would say 100% of the ones that I've spoken to haven't had the experience themselves, but I'm sure that there are some out there that have had the personal experience and are guiding people through it, and I'm sure that that's a much more grounded approach. But really, very frequently, I'm seeing teachers of Kundalini yoga and teachers of other types of systems that are actually designed to trigger or awaken this energy. And to that, I say, what? What are you trying to do? Unless you are actually giving your students resources to deal with the fallout, right? So if you are in some kind of a field where you are trying to help or guide this subtle body experience in your peers, your friends, your students, then please do us all a really big favor and have a long list of resources. Give them your phone number, give them the phone numbers of 5 therapists, whatever it is you need to do, but create an atmosphere of support, because when that energy hits, it often will make you feel like you are losing it. And I'll say for the first 10 years or so of my own experience, I really didn't talk about it with almost anybody. Because I did think, well, I'm obviously insane, So what is Kundalini? As I said in my last video, I don't know. I could give you an encyclopedia's worth of description from the past 1500 or so years on what other people have said it is. A lot of people describe Kundalini as the latent energy that lives at the bottom of the spine, and when it's triggered, moves upward. In some systems of Tantra or Kashmiri Shaivism, there's actually 2 Kundalinis. There's the one that goes up, and then there's one that starts at the top of the crown and moves downward. And actually what I've been exploring lately, which I love, is this idea of Kundalini, wherever it's coming from, top or bottom, as landing at the heart. So really it's an exploration of heart expansion. And we have to say this with a little bit of responsibility, personal responsibility, right? Because when we start to get into the layer of the heart, just like what I was saying a moment ago about Kundalini, oftentimes it's not rainbows and butterflies. You're dealing with a year's worth, a lifetime's worth, decades worth, whatever it is that you're dealing with, but material and layers of material to get through and into the heart. And that can be challenging. Actually, it's almost guaranteed to be challenging. And sometimes you're even taking on patterns and energies that go beyond this lifetime. So maybe you're having past life glimpses, which have happened to me, certainly. And sometimes you're dealing with family patterns or ancestral patterns coming through. So the material that comes up for review is complex, it's murky, it is, tethered into wider bands of energy that sometimes you're aware of and sometimes you're not aware of. And so I think it's worth talking about the trauma of Kundalini and what can happen. So some of the symptoms that you might have when you first have a Kundalini awakening, and I'll speak to some of the things that have happened to me, but then also to things that happen to peers and friends. In the past 2 to 3 years, I've built up quite a community of different people in my life who have these types of experiences. And so just reflecting with different people shows that the platter in front of you is very unique to you, what you're experiencing. Okay, so for me, I did have a lot of awakening very immediately into the subtle body system of chakras and also the prana vayus. I could feel where prana was moving in my body. I was very physically connected into that Kundalini energetic experiencing. Had a lot of kriyas happening, which is when your body moves, especially the wave moves through your spine. And this would happen daytime, nighttime, especially nighttime for some reason, always at night. A lot of spontaneous yoga postures, a lot of spontaneous chants coming through, often some channeling about people around me. I could see things that were going on in people's lives and it felt a little bit intrusive, so I tried to kind of not go down those paths. But a lot of things can happen. I have some friends who it comes in through the ears, so there are auditory experiences. Some friends that have visitations in dream or in meditation with very powerful teachers, whether they're alive, whether they've passed on, whether it's a divine teacher or otherwise, where we have so many of these guides and teachers. So there's just a whole lot of stuff that can happen. And, when it's happening, it's very, very real. In fact, it's more real than the dream character that, you're hearing right now from me. But then when it passes, it's very easy to look back and say, well, that didn't really happen, did it? So there's definitely this toggling period of not totally knowing whether you're really sane or not. And I just want to be a friendly voice to remind you that whatever is happening, do talk to somebody about it so that you can get some help, some guidance, and some expertise. But hopefully talk to somebody who doesn't just understand the mind to know really whether you are having a psychological crisis, but also somebody that understands the energetic body so that they can determine what is the nature of these experiences that you're having. For me, really from the moment of that first experience, I was drawn really obsessively into a study of the California direct path of non-dual kind of modern day Advaita Vedanta studies, which I still love to this day. I have some teachers that are true teachers, true gifts and friends. And so those types of studies are really important to have. The first time that I really had one of these types of experiences before even Kundalini came in was when I was 12. And I believe I talked about that in the first video, but that experience was powerful enough for me to create my own religion around it that I called One. So clearly there is a directionality to Kundalini, and that directionality has a lot to do with dissolving, right? Dissolving the things that are deep in us that pertain to now or some period before, but either way, it's a part of the character, a part of the scaffolding of the self that is no longer working. Well, what happens when you're breaking down a scaffolding? No, it's challenging, right? Like there's always going to be a little bit of dust. There's going to be some breaking that happens when these structures come down. So here are the rules that I have to help anybody going through this process. And surprise, but these rules are built right into the structure of almost all of the deep non-dual based religious traditions, including yoga, Jainism, Buddhism, and so many others. So the first one is have compassion for yourself. That might be the first 5 rules, actually. Have a lot of compassion for yourself, because you need to turn your attention in to love yourself and to really sit with yourself, all right? This listening into yourself is so much work that creating an entire culture of love and compassion and kindness for yourself, your experiences, is very necessary. Now, especially if you're going through trauma, right? Reliving trauma. A lot of times Kundalini will bring up trauma that has been lived in your life in order to release it. So please practice compassion with yourself, right? And know that you're in a process. Okay? So I have this image in my head. I actually have a couple of images that I'll share with you, but I kind of think of ourselves when we build in a geological kind of way. So we're keep building onto ourselves, and we're up here at some point when Kundalini hits, and you have these freedom glimpses. Okay, so there is a little bit of bliss in Kundalini for sure. A little bit of dissolving as the infinite that you are, right? But there is no such thing as just hovering above it all, hovering like a bird flying over your life, right? At some point, you're going to have to look at that structure you've created, those layers, those geological formations that you've created, and plumb dive back down through them. And there's some gritty stuff in there, isn't there? So you do have to, unfortunately, relive a lot of material when you're going through a very strong Kundalini experience. So compassion for yourself, easy on yourself, welcome in the things that don't feel welcome, the things that do feel welcome. Read a little bit of Rumi. He's really a master. Hafiz. There are some great masters of literature that remind us this. Welcome it all in. And the other thing is, try to be honest with yourself, right? So honesty after kindness, right? Supported by that kindness, but really try to be honest with yourself. And when you're listening into yourself, know when you need to stop. So the listening isn't so much a listening at the brain, right? The brain is going to do what the brain is going to do, but we start to cultivate a listening at the heart. And the heart is our reorienting center now. All right, so we want to move our attention kind of down, our breath down into the heart, our sense of I, that me, right? Not me, but me, right here at the universal cave of the heart. This is a really important thing to do when you're going through one of these processes. So be honest with yourself, be accountable to yourself. And most importantly, notice what you notice. And that's part of being honest with yourself. But as you begin to deepen your noticing of yourself, your patterns, then you start to see what that noticing is made out of. And hopefully, if you really are having a Kundalini experience, this is really the core of what Kundalini is waking up in you. Now, I don't know what Kundalini is, but I do know what she does. And what she does is she reorients our vision, so to speak, so that we start to see that the fabric of all things is made out of our knowing of it. So I had an experience maybe 3 or 4 years ago, a long time into Kundalini, a long time into these types of energetic body experiences and meditation-like experiences where I was walking down the street and all of a sudden I just saw that everything is made out of love. And it's not a light thing to see. You don't just go out and start saying, well, everything is made out of love, right? Kind of want to punch someone in the face when they say that to you. But what I mean to say is that everything is so thrilled, so excited to be there. Whether it's a flower that is excited and thrilled to be there, whether it's an emotion, right? You may notice that if you have grief in yourself, there's really no room for anything other than that. That's what I mean. It's a self kind of fully saturated isness of things. And if you can sit in that isness of the material in front of you, at some point, it opens up that isness at its core, or the canvas holding it, not just holding it really, but every aspect of it is a kind of blossoming of love. And I bring this up because Kundalini is essentially about the seeing of that. But you don't want to appropriate that message. You don't want to just jump over the mud of the material that's coming through you and try to just live in this place of, but everything is love and I should feel that all the time. No, not at all. Kundalini is gritty, it is messy, she'll mess you up. She'll grab you by the tail and just whack you around. Believe me, she will. You don't need to believe me if you've been there, you know. But essentially, that is a seeing and a possibility that you can start to invite into your life. And I've gotten to the place now where rather than looking backward at a pattern that's been working, that Kundalini's been bringing up into my surface, and some of these patterns take 6 months to look at, some of them take a year or 2 years to look at, and it's usually something pretty deep in there that I didn't realize I was running, like maybe it's my desire to be liked by others will really get challenged. That one will really mess you up. Or maybe something's wrong with the way I'm communicating out to the world. Maybe it's boundaries. That was a big one for me. Any number of these kind of meta patterns, right? So these patterns, rather than looking back on them and saying, oh yeah, well that was really hard to go through, but now I can see what was underneath all of that and what the energy was getting at to clear that. Like now I can see that the challenge, the pain, maybe even the trauma, right, was worth it in retrospect. Now my prayer is, while I'm going through it, I don't want to wait for later. I don't want to wait until I have the rear view mirror. Right now, there's plenty of agitation right now. Just walk out your door or, hang out with your kids, your relationships, your family, Remember what Ram Dass said, if you think you're enlightened, go hang out with your family, right? That's what I'm talking about. Now you have so much ability. There's plenty of agitation in the world with coronavirus, the economy. Now, in the middle of it, in the middle of the slog, can you look around and see it? And what is the gift here? The thing that I thought was my defect, the thing that I thought was my challenge, the thing that I thought I had to work through to get. What if that's the gift? What if that is the thing that the jewel that's happening right now? So I offer this to you as a practice. Don't wait for later to look back on the difficult path. But when you're in the middle of the difficult path, when you're in the middle of the challenge, when you're in the middle of the perspective of, wow, I really have this thing that I need to work on so that later on it can be cleared. Well, don't wait for later on. Well, right now, can you sit with that and see that just maybe that challenge, that defect, that trauma, that grittiness, that is the gift. So that's what I wanted to bring up. Kundalini is not all rainbows and butterflies. It's messy, it's muddy, it is sticky, and try to have some friends around that. Try to develop some community around that. Call people up, search it out. There are some amazing teachers out there who have written books on this, and they do groups and they sit together and they talk together. So try to find some resources for yourself, create community. And if you do happen to teach a system where you're trying to trigger Kundalini and you haven't had the experience, especially please create resources for your students, because the energy is designed to awaken in some of these kriyas and some of these breath works and some of these postures, and it will work. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, it will work. And so you need to have the responsibility to know that this energy is real, and that you need to have the resources for your friends, your peers, your students to help them, because it's not roses and butterflies. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's the opposite. So that's what I wanted to say today. And if your experience is beautiful, perfect, and blissful, I admire you deeply. And if it's sloggy, then know that you're in it, and maybe you can see the beauty in it instead of having to wait for later to process this nastiness, right? What if that is the jewel? What if that is the gift? From the perspective of your heart, it is. From the perspective of your mind, it isn't. But we're in a process of reorienting ourselves to the heart, right? And so from the perspective of the heart, all things are here in purpose, in real time. Not a problem, but a gift. Have a beautiful day. Thanks for listening. Namaste.